Spending your last command point to re-roll a 2 into a 1. It's the Vox Cascadia Podcast. Welcome back, gentlemen. My name's Chuck. It's great to have you all here with us. Tyler, say hello to the people.
Hey, how y'all doing tonight?
It's great to hear from you again, Tyler. And then Connor.
What's up, everybody? Hope you guys all had a good weekend.
Speaking of weekend, let's just catch back up. Connor, since we last spoke, what have you been up to?
Not a ton. I started building some Casterkin, which was fun. Reprimed 2 of the models because the paint scheme I was going for wasn't coming out so hot. But beyond that, I think you're gonna have to call me a liar, everyone that sees me this Saturday. I'm probably gonna bring Hunter Clade. I saw the belts we got for the tournament, and I kind of want to win it hard, so I'm bringing my main A team.
I don't think anybody ever doubted that you would be bringing Hunter Clade. So, especially when you got a great partner like Brandon Bean, who can pilot pretty much anything, it sounds like. So, Tyler, what about you? What have you been up to since we talked to the nice folks last?
So, I've been having a little bit of trouble hobbying lately, just schedule and stuff like that. So the bug finally bit me, and I was like, okay, I'm going to get some stuff done. And I have like the last little bits of stuff to clip and glue on for my team for the tournament this weekend. And I couldn't find my clippers, so I had to go out and buy a new set of clippers.
There's nothing wrong with going and buying more hobby supplies. I enjoy that. Did you get a set of God hands, or did you settle for like some Tamiya ones, or what?
I lost my God hands, which is the part that really hurts. So they're somewhere in my hobby room. I just have no clue where. So I went to the hardware store and picked up some Kleins because they make some pretty nice side snips.
So you've got 4 days left. Are you going to be able to get the team done before the Tag Team Terror Tournament?
No problem at all. I paint fast.
That's good. My hobby for the last week has been a little bit of the Beta Decima stuff. I was at the Oregon coast with my girlfriend Jenna for the weekend and got to meet up with Sam, a gentleman from the Discord who lives down on the coast there. And we met in a brewery to play a game of Kill Team. I brought my Blades of Cain. He brought Farstalker Kinband and had a great time. It was a great environment to play in, and I really enjoyed it. Also, spent the entire weekend bugging Connor through Discord about how to build the Hunter Clade. So I'm actually on the Hunter Clade train. We're working towards the bright light of the Omnissiah, and so they may actually get on the board soon.
Yeah, I was super excited to see those photos when Chuck first sent me just like a Skitarii Marshall build. I practically literally jumped with joy, which was awesome. And then, I saw those photos from the brewery as well, and that looked absolutely awesome. Really cool environment, and it's always fun to play Kill Team, in a weird place to play it, which makes it all that much more fun.
Yeah, one of the awesome things about it was it was just a very nice space. Lots of big tables. We got there right at noon when they opened and procured a table away from the bar, and they had some great beer down there. And then also we had a ton of people just come up and be like, what are you guys doing? So we had a few people that knew what Warhammer was, and some people that just kind of looked at plastic models and people rolling dice and yelling across the table. And so hopefully build the community a little bit. Met somebody from Yakima who plays or knows of 40K at least. So hopefully we'll see them jump in the Discord.
The dream of running an event inside of a brewery is very real for me. I think that's like wish list kind of stuff.
Well, Obelisk would be a great place to do it. I believe they run a lot of events there as it is, and it's a really nice open space. Essentially, you have a bar against a back wall, if you saw my picture, and then the rest of the space is just some tables. I was doing the math while I was there, and we could easily do like a 12-person tournament down on the coast. And I talked to Sam actually about maybe setting something up and coming down to help him run something once he gets a little more comfortable with the game too.
You could have it be like a weekend at the beach type tournament, maybe do a full 2-day, double round robin type of event. If it's a smaller space like that, make sure you can really get some exciting stuff. Plus, it's always cool to go to Astoria and have it's a good time at the beach, It's a neat little town. It reminds me of anytime you go, it's always fun.
You know what? I grew up going to the Washington coast quite a bit, but we'd always drive through Astoria on the Oregon side based on just proximity of where I lived and the easiest route. And it was always just kind of a drive through town. The coolest thing they had, for me at least, when I was a teenager, was a McDonald's. But now they've really revitalized their downtown. There's a lot of great breweries down there. Fort George, which is one of my favorite breweries, visited there a couple times. Breakside, which is another kind of local brewery, has there. And then Obelisk is just outside of town. Plus there's Astoria Brewing in Bowie. It's a great place, and they've added a ton of restaurants in there too. So I'd like to, I want to keep exploring, and I really enjoyed spending about 4 days bumming around town down there.
Welcome to the tourism segment of our podcast also. We're going to be exploring areas in the Pacific Northwest that you should come out and visit.
Next up is Forks, Washington, and why you're joining Connor's tour of Twilight despite never seeing any of the movies or reading the books.
You know, I actually went through Forks in about 2013. My mom and I did a tour of the like Olympic Peninsula up there, and you literally drive into Forks, and it's like one side says like vampires welcome, and the other side says vampires not welcome. But on the way back from Astoria, you drive past Kalama, which is where they film the movies. So if you really want to get the whole Northwest Twilight experience, you've got to go up to the Olympic Peninsula and then back down towards the Vancouver area. So now that we've got our Northwest tourism segment out of the way for this week, by the way, if you'd like to know about any areas in the Northwest, just let us know and we'll definitely go and check them out. One thing I think we could do actually is maybe an invitational at the coast. That'd be nice. Get a few people down there, set an area up where we can invite some players that we know are going to be super excited to do it. I think getting players to the coast for like a normal tournament would be harder just because it's a little bit out of the way, but it might be a thing we could do in the future.
Yeah, I definitely think that a small kind of a selective tournament like that would be a lot of fun. Make it a getaway event for the community and some of the people who work real hard to make it all happen.
Yeah, I would love to do that. Like I said, Astoria has become one of my new favorites as much as I used to hate it in the past. So, like I said, I met Sam down there, and Sam is got some Kill Team experience, but trying to learn about how to build a little bit of a community down there. It's harder on the coast. There's not really any game stores or anything, but that's going to be our main topic tonight is how to get more people into the game, but mostly advice for a new and still learning player. So we're going to go over a few topics that can help you maybe if you're starting to learn the game, or maybe just a reminder if you want to help somebody else get into the game. So let's start off the bat with some of the basic things that you kind of need to play Kill Team. So one of the major things you need is the tools. So there's a few specific things that you need. First one is going to be measures. So with Kill Team, each of your units can move a certain amount. They can shoot certain distances depending on the weapons. Most of them are going to be the full board, but a few of those are going to be only 6 inches. So there's a couple different ways, though, that you can measure that out. Gentlemen, what are your favorite ways to measure, and what kind of tools do you use specifically?
I'm personally a big fan of combination tools, ones that cover all the major measurements. So 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inch, and 6 inch, which are the 4 most common measurements in Kill Team. I think that 1 to 2 of those really makes the game a lot more playable more quickly in getting basic measurements out and always having the right tool to make the right measurement in your hand at any given time.
So with the measures, part of the game is also declaring your order. So are you engaged? Are you going to conceal? And there's a couple different ways to do it. Coming with the Kill Team box is if you get one of the starter boxes or the starter set, there is tokens that come with it that are cardboard, but we've also seen some people that get acrylic tokens, or we even have people in our own community that have made the nachos, they call them, which have all 4 of those orders. They engaged on conceal, they have the 4 orders. They have engaged unactivated, engaged activated, conceal unactivated, and conceal unactivated. Connor, what do you like to use for your tokens to show what you guys are going to do?
So personally, I'm a fan of just the nice, simple acrylics. This like the 3D acrylic versions of the cardboard tokens you get. But I definitely enjoy the nachos. They're very nice. Sean, thank you so much for providing most of the Washington crew and plenty of the Oregon crew itself through 3D printing a bunch of those for us. But yeah, I'm used to playing the nice and simple flip up and down. It's what I got used to playing X-Wing, and it kind of stuck.
Yeah, I like the cardboard ones. I haven't used any of the acrylic ones yet myself, and I have the nachos sitting on my 3D printer still, but I haven't had a chance to use them. I know Sean has been great about creating a bunch of different things, and we'll throw in the show notes a link to where you can find his stuff.
You know, one thing I do like about the nachos quite a bit is that since they mount right up against the base flushly, is that they work as a placeholder for where your miniature was. So if you need to do any kind of measurements or there's any kind of discrepancy about whether your model can actually get there, you know you're placing it back in the same place it originally was if you don't have a stand-in model available at that time.
Yeah, that's definitely a very nice feature. Anything like that you can just make sure you have precise measurements. So whenever you're making a movement is good because it means you're not going to accidentally cheat someone by either gaining an inch that you shouldn't have or anything like that. So if you're a new player, definitely make sure you either have a spare base, spare model, or something like that to mark where your model is before making any sort of like, can I fully make this movement type situation.
Yeah, and I think that's something we can really address more down the road too in our etiquette section too, because I think what you guys are touching on is super important to make sure that you know where stuff started so you can put it back when you change your mind. So beyond tokens, this is a dice game, so we need dice. What kind of dice do we need to bring, Connor? And what do you like to bring yourself? Do you have any special dice you like?
Yeah, definitely D6. It's the standard. Everyone's gonna have them. The easiest set I'd say though is you probably need just that basic like chess set of 12, or they're a little bit bigger because most of the time you're at max rolling 4 dice, occasionally 6 if you have like a big minigun type gun. But you want those slightly bigger dice just because it's easier for your opponent to see. And beyond D6, I'd often recommend some D12s. Most units in this game are going to be, if they're a little bit tankier, when you take some damage, drop into 12 wounds or below. And a D12 is a simple way of measuring that because you can use the D6 or use 2 of them. Even different colors doesn't hurt. But I like having them being a dice you're never going to normally roll, so that way you don't accidentally pick it up and misadjust your health. Beyond that, another D12 or D6, but a different color than what you normally are rolling to represent command points. Not a bad idea either.
So it sounds like we need about 66 and a couple D12s and maybe another like D8 or something to signify command points. Some other teams too, like the Casterkin you're building, have things like elite points. I always like to put my elite points on a D20 because you can get up into the 14, 18 area. So that's another thing to have too.
Yeah, definitely. And if you're going to go dice, try and find some that match your paint scheme. That's what I did. And it's a little goofy, but it's fun to have them match. And anytime I paint up a kill team, I try and get a set to match them because it just feels like it's a little bit luckier. And as we all know, dice gods are the most important thing to be praying to when playing a kill team.
I'm right there with you, Connor. I'm a big proponent of when I paint and build a team that I buy a set of dice for that team, and that's all I roll with that team, and you know that's their personality. Occasionally, if I get a really bad set of dice, maybe they'll get chucked and replaced with the same color, but not often.
Yeah, I have to agree with the specific dice for specific teams. I have been playing a few teams, and while I haven't got the rules down for them, I have got the bespoke dice for those teams for my Templar intercession team as well as the Blades of Cain. So I'll have to find some AdMech dice, I guess.
Another suggestion for dice, I really like micro D10s. You know, like I think they're like 3 or 6 millimeter ones. They're really good to set next to your operative. In most cases, your operative will have 10 or less wounds, unless you're playing one of the few elite teams. And then it's a really good way to count up or down your wounds, whichever way you do that.
That's another great point, Tyler. I, at Las Vegas Open, was actually given a set of those micro ones by one of my opponents. I don't know if it was they're just super nice or they saw that I was struggling with what I was using. And it was, I cannot remember their name, the Corsairs player from Bats. I played them on day 2 and they gave me a full set of them and I've been using them religiously ever since. So yeah, a mini set of dice is a great thing to have too.
Same here. He actually gave me a set that matches the dice that I use for my team. So that was really wonderful.
You guys are really selling me having to come to LVO just to get some dice now.
That's not the only reason to come. It's but free dice is a really good one. So we've got measures, tokens, and dice. One important thing to do is know what our teams actually do. So I think it's super important to make sure you have the rules for your team. A lot of people will use an app. I still prefer the books. I've tried to use the apps like Wahapedia or KT Dash, but I still go with the books, or a cheat sheet for your team too, as well as the Kill Team Light rules.
I'm personally a big proponent of the book or a cheat sheet for your team, rather than data cards for your team. I think data cards can be really useful for the first couple games, but once you get past that, I think that they can really slow you down if you're looking at them regularly. Using the book will kind of prompt you to memorize more of the rules more often, and I think that you'll see more consistent and smoother play by doing so.
Now, playing Blades of Cain recently, being one of the newer boxes, I'm actually kind of doing a hybrid of both. So the Blades of Cain team, if you don't know, and the new Scouts team actually come with data sheets on cards. And since Blades of Cain really only have like 6 different operatives, it's pretty easy to have the 3 or 4 that I need for the operatives I've selected. But then when it comes back to like the aspect stuff, their extra special rules that they have, I'm using the book for those because they do have those on cards, but it turns out to be like 20 different cards.
Yeah, definitely having the book, both for yourself and I'd say even more importantly for your opponent, super useful to have. I still carry around my annual 2022, despite it being practically all but outdated at this point for the AdMex rules, because A, is this good? Because sometimes you're going to say stuff that sounds crazy. You're like, yeah, I can reroll all my attack dice right now. Stuff like that can add up very quickly, and you just want to make sure anytime you're playing someone, you're being honest and that if they have any reason to check, they actually can. And if you're a team like mine that gets updated all the time, definitely try and have at least a recent-ish sheet of paper with the balanced data slate and the adjustments and stuff printed out, tucked into that same page or like at the back of the book. That way you can be like, here's what it said originally, and here's an update for you as well.
One thing that I've actually seen with one of my local buddies here at Mindtaker, Brandon actually plays Pathfinders, but since they've been updated a few times, he actually took and put sticky notes in the book in the areas where they've been updated. And I really like that. I thought that was a great idea, whether that's cutting out the pieces of the balanced data slate and posting them in there. That way you can still have your rules all in one place, but then have the most updated rules too.
Generally, for me, I use like a printed out master copy of the FAQs that have all the updates in it that I need to reference. And then I will make notes in my books personally.
So one thing with the books, a super nice quality of life thing, if you decide you're going to stay into this game, is getting them spiral bound. Take them to Kinko's, FedEx Kinko's, and I think it is maybe $5 a book, but they'll put a nice clear cover on the front, black plastic on the back, and then put it on a spiral bound notebook, which makes opening up the books to the pages that you want to reference and having those laid nice and flat on a table, it makes all the difference in the world when you're using those books. I have about 4 of mine done. I need to go get the rest done.
Yeah, it's an absolute must to have your books spiral bound. Once you do it, you'll never want your books another way.
So besides our team rules, one thing I think is really great to have is the Kill Team Light rules. So can you tell us a little bit about what those are, Tyler, and what do you think of those?
Yeah, the Kill Team Light rules are just the downloadable Kill Team core rules that are available from the Warhammer community site under the download section. So basically what they are is they give you an easy way to download the simple rules to play the game so that you can play them with what models you have and what rules you have for those models. There's actually quite a few teams that are available for download there also. Blades of Cain recently went up along with Scouts, and then we have Intercession posted up there fully in their rules.
So tangent real quick. I think it's awesome that the Scouts and the Blades of Cain actually have their rules online. Tyler, do you think this is going to be the future for how we get kill teams released? They come out in the box, they're out for a little bit, and then by the time that they're released in a solo box, we're going to see the rules online for free?
I sure hope so. I think it would be an incredibly positive change for the game. As it stands now, sometimes game rules will become discontinued or hard to come by. As an event organizer, that becomes difficult for me. I can't imagine just your average person trying to source something.
Yeah, it's definitely a nice change of pace and hopefully what will become the new standard. Ideally, we'll get all the old edition, or not all the old edition, but old teams, season 2022 and season 23 coming out with that. That'd be great. But if it's only just these boxes that come out on Beta Decimate, I'm not going to complain because it's a step in the right direction. And ideally, I know Games Workshop, you're totally listening to us. Make the Warhammer 40k app also support the Kill Team rules. I use that thing all the time, and I would love to be able to use it for Kill Team all the time. Anytime I can tell someone, use the official app, that's more people looking at your products. So make sure you do it soon, please.
I do agree that this is overall extremely positive, like I voiced before. But I kind of feel like this may be something we see more of in the future, especially with potentially another edition coming online. We may see updated rules for old teams in another edition or something like that in the future.
So the last tool that I'd like to talk about is super glue. I have spent many a day gluing my models back to their bases because I've got them on a nice fancy resin base, and I pick them up and it snaps them right off the base. I've seen my opponents do it too. I think having a little bit of super glue in your bag ready to go is just going to make your life a million times better when the first round of your tournament you knock your guy off his base.
I 100% agree. I do constant field repairs to my models. There are two glues I recommend above all others. It is the Crazy Glue, not the Crazy Glue, the Gorilla Glue gel with the green cap, or the Loctite gel. Both of those super glues are superior to the other super glues.
Yeah, fully agree with that green cap super glue gel. I have like 3 of those I'm looking at right now. But I've also recently swapped 2 because I wanted a little bit more precise. They have like a Gorilla Glue with a blue cap that looks kind of like a pin with like a big orange button you can press down. That's super cool. I highly recommend that one because it allows you to get like an exact precise glue amount where you want. But one other tool you're going to want probably as well, a laser sight. Just that classic $2-3 Army Painter red laser sight. It's going to be useful. People are going to have obscuring questions. There's going to be measurements on line of sight. Can I see you? It's a very tight angle. Boom, laser sight from above solves all those problems really quick.
Yeah, I don't know where you're buying your laser sights and finding them for like $2 or $3, but yes, that is a great tool to have. It's really nice to help with drawing cover lines and seeing what you can do and what your opponent can do.
Yeah, it might just be worth going to the pet store. I think that's where I got my original one, in like the Dollar Tree section of it. Because, cats like laser sights. So if you got that, boom, it's a 2-in-1 purchase right there.
So we've figured out what we need to play Kill Team, but how do you pick a team when you're just starting off? So, Connor, what are some things that you think about when you actually recommend Kill Team to someone, or what's a team? What's your thought process behind picking a team yourself?
So obviously, I pitch them Mech first and foremost, but I know that not everyone wants to embrace the greatest team in Kill Team, so I have to come up with some other ones. The biggest thing I ask for is whether they have come from games like MMOs, particularly League of Legends. I unfortunately put myself through the pain of learning that game and playing it for the past decade now. I don't even know how long. But if people have knowledge of that, I can use it a lot to describe some of the mechanics in Kill Team. Like, do you prefer to be a more ranged backline type character? You're very glass cannony. If you are, you might like Pathfinders or Corsairs, where you do a lot of damage, but you're not the most tanky. Do you prefer to be up in people's faces being a tank? In that case, try out Legionaries, Intercession, Orcs to an extent. Someone where they're going to have sticking power in melee. Beyond that, I obviously go with the golden rule. What faction looks the coolest to you? Because even if they say like Warp Coven or Heretic Circle, I'm like, look, those teams are going to be super complicated. And if you're new to tabletop games, it might be a while before you really start to enjoy it. But if you like the models, that's going to make the most important part of the hobby matter to you. And you're going to actually want to sign up and continue to play those games.
Yeah, that's a super comprehensive way to go about it. I love that. I wouldn't have anything else to say differently. Tyler, anything you'd like to add to Connor's way?
It was really, really comprehensive, as you said. It's very thorough. I usually recommend that people start off the first couple games with like Intercession, and then go from there. Pick whatever team they think is looking cool and learn the game. Because like Connor said, it's rule of cool that dominates Warhammer.
Yeah, very true. Definitely make sure that they have a little bit of experience playing the game first, is what I'd often say. I carry around like 3 or 4 Marines on me at any time, because if someone's like brand new to the hobby, the most important thing you can do is like do a single turning point thing. Where you're just like, here's the models. I'm going to give you 2 Marines, and I'm going to have like 5 guys of whatever, not Marine strength, but like basic guardsmen. And just move up your models and let them shoot you off the board, just so they can understand the basics of like If you enjoy doing this, you'll enjoy playing Kill Team. But if you're not having fun just moving your guys and shooting, maybe not the game for you. But most of the time I found that just letting people shoot models off the board and roll dice, as long as they're not rolling all ones, they're going to have a good time doing it because this is fun. There's a reason we all come back to this.
I'm just picturing Connor in like a cafe or something, coming up to somebody with a trench coat and being like, hey, you like models? And pulling out, opening one side, showing the intercession, opening the other side, showing some vet guard, and then the cops being called.
Listen, it doesn't matter what my priors are, Chuck. You just need to stop airing out my dirty laundry onto the internet, please.
So once we've gotten somebody to commit to it, maybe they had a game and they liked it, they have to buy their team. Some teams can be very complex to buy, like, say, our favorite Hunter Clade. They can be up to like a 5 to 6 box team, meaning you're going to spend like maybe more than you want to spend. What are some 1 box teams that y'all would recommend to people who maybe want to start the game and they aren't too heavy mental load, but also are going to be fun, and it's not going to also be a big investment to get going?
I mean, there's one real answer to this, and that's Commandos when it comes down to it. But Felgor is another great 1-box team out there. Other than that, I don't know there's too many I would recommend as a single box. Most take at least a couple other units to add in.
See, Tyler, I figured you'd go with Legionaries. They're pretty much a 1-box team, aren't they?
13 models in my roster, and I used almost every single one of them.
All right, fair enough.
Yeah, Legionaries definitely can be a lot if you're trying to match every mark, but I for the most part, think they can be a 1-box team for any sort of new player, because you can proxy models. Most people aren't going to be like, oh, that's a corn mark, and that's a Nurgle one. But for the actual team, I'd go with Beyond Commandos, because they are a bit of a pain to build, as they're infamously known for. A little bit more complicated, but I think they are a very fun modeling recommendation if people are really like into, I want to paint and I want to build some cool looking stuff. Star Striders, it's literally a 1-box team, and the rules are pretty straightforward for the most part. A lot of their like special team abilities kind of either happen before the game starts, like giving yourself an extra command point or extra equipment, which is good for players that are newer because it means there's less stuff for them to track, as well as they have a decent mix of melee, of mobility, of shooting that will get them familiar with all the special rules that you'll see in the game, or most of the special rules.
So we've got Commandos, we got Felgor. I said Legionaries. Connor says Star Striders. Any other 1-box teams out there that you think might be a good option for people?
I mean, Geller Pox are technically a 1-box team. I don't think that they're hard necessarily, but the floor for them isn't low by any means.
Okay. Yeah, I think they can be a little cagey or a little tricky to play, but I think once you figure them out, and they're just a cool looking team too, and all in that 1 box is a really nice value prospect too.
Plus, with how gross the cultists look, if it's a bad paint job, hey, that only adds to the flavor if they're supposed to look gross. Another team I'd recommend, Casterkin. If they really want to pick like a shooting team and they're like, yeah, Pathfinders kind of might be my goal, I'll be like, cool, Pathfinders are a 2-box team and a little bit complicated figuring out. Casterkin, though, are in a great place for the most part. They blow up all elite models, and they got dice fixing, which is always good for a new player because it's good to figure out, hey, what shots are worth and what shots aren't, and how much can I fix this? And plus, Casterkin are just a nice, simple paint job. Doing them right now is very fun because they've only got like a handful of difficult details to reach.
You know, when I think it comes down to it, Scouts are also pretty much a 1-box team. You could probably stretch out the roster a little bit, but probably do it with 10 models. No problem.
So there's quite a bit of choice of teams that people can play. Now, rule of cool being, if you think it's cool, you should play it. Aside, what would be some teams that you maybe would dissuade people from starting off with because of either the amount that they have to put into it or how difficult they are, besides AdMech?
Yeah, I'd recommend AdMech, but they are definitely a more expensive team. You got to spend at least 2 boxes to get even a bare minimum roster. Otherwise, though, Warp Coven. They are a very complicated team. They're a 3 or 2 box team, depending on how much you want to proxy, but most cases a 3-box team. Paint jobs, from what I hear, nightmare. All that trim adds up and can really cramp your hand. And their rules are just really, really complicated. And you got to do a lot of work for very little payoff that other teams can just do at bare minimum. So it can be a little bit frustrating as a new player to figure them out.
Tyler, do you have a team that if somebody was like, hey, I'm trying to decide between this team and this team, you would dissuade them from taking the X team and push them towards, say, Commandos or something?
I think as a first team, I'm going to push anyone away from any of the traditional White Dwarf or first year annual teams, other than Star Striders or Gellerpox. So that's Wormblade, Void Dancers, Hunter Clade, and Warp Coven. Mostly because those teams are extremely expensive to build. Another one would be Blades of Cain, because you need a lot of models for Blades of Cain to work effectively. And then as far as model count, Inquisitorial Agents can get up there, and Chaos Cults too. I think that's 3 boxes at minimum for Cults.
Yeah, my buddy Nick and I were just looking at the Chaos Cults the other day, and you can't find the Ashes of Faith box where they all came in, and you're looking at least 3 boxes. My Blades of Cain box ended up being a 4-box team because I pretty much bought the Dire Avengers just to use the heads on Guardians because I didn't like the sculpts of them.
Yeah, unfortunately, just any of those White Dwarf teams add up in price a lot. It's a lot of special characters, which are fun to paint and build, especially the Wormblade team, because it's just got 4 unique characters, each doing their own special thing. But that's like $120 just to get those guys, and that's not even including the fact you got to get a box of neophytes on top of them, sometimes even 2 if you want like a full 20-man roster with unique options. Otherwise, though, another team I'd maybe shy people away from would be the Heretic Circle. While it is a 1-box team, it's a very slow team, similar to Warp Coven. A lot of mobility you got to kind of account for, which can feel bad when you're just losing because you're not able to really understand the full positioning. But thankfully, they kind of make up for it with the tankiness. That can be really fun when your models don't go down. But their mechanics as well, just does my model come back being a dice roll, can be really frustrating. But I would recommend them more so like a second team when you're trying to learn something a little bit more complicated. And it's a simple, Necrons are a nice paint job. It's a silver and some shade. You're going to have a good time painting those guys up.
I agree that Heretic Circle is a fantastic second team, especially if you're moving from something more simplistic like Intercession or Legionary to that.
I think one team that I really like that is not necessarily a 1-box team, but it could be because of the just dearth of Marines out there, is Intercession. I think I enjoy them, no matter what Greg says about them being a boring team. I think they're fun to play, low mental load, and I think you can pretty easily get a team together by going to your GW store and getting the free model, and then finding your friends to just give you Space Marines, because everybody's got Space Marines, whether you play Space Marines or not.
Yeah, definitely getting Intercession. You're going to find people that have Marines. Unfortunately, it is a 2-box team, but ideally, if you're getting into Kill Team and you either have someone that's already into Marines, or you and your friend both want to get it, because Marines are fun paint jobs. They're nice and simple, and if you're getting brand new to the hobby, you're going to find them. Splitting an Assault Intercessors and just a normal Intercessors box with a friend, great way to do it. Or now that they're kind of back out, a single Stern Guards box. The new ones gives you 5 Marines. It's not enough for a full 6-man, but it gets you all the special bits you want. They'll look really cool, and it's most of what you'll need for an Intercession. And most hobby stores will be able to chuck you a free Marine on sprue as well.
Yeah, and if you need an Assault Intercessor to go with those Stern Guard, I can get you an Assault Intercessor. Everybody's got Assault Intercessors. So a couple things we talked about is we talked about bespoke, but there's also, when the game first came out, there was 2 teams that came out. There was the Veteran Guard as well as the Commandos. And they also put out a book called The Compendium. Now, the Compendium has teams that you can build across from a bunch of different Warhammer armies, but they never really got updated or anything. Tyler, tell us a little bit about the Compendium and your thoughts on it and why you hate it as much as Into the Dark.
So, my hate is not as strong as people get. I don't think that it's ideal. But ideally, I want everyone playing Kill Team, or everyone who's interested in tabletop skirmish games, to be playing Kill Team. So if you have the models to play the game, and you have a Compendium team and you don't have the other ones, you should play with it. There's a lot of teams in Compendium that are really good. I think that they just lack the flavor that you see in a lot of the bespoke teams. Again, it has nothing to do with how good any of the teams are, because some of them are extremely good, especially in certain circumstances.
Yeah, I'm always telling people the Tempest Scions still got plenty of hit flavor and power. They hit on threes, and you can often be rerolling ones the entire game. That's a powerful team. But starting the problem is what makes Kill Team fun, at least for me. Or rather, part of it is the amount of flavor that comes through both in the models and the rules. And unfortunately, a lot of the Compendium teams lack that little bit of spice. A lot of them are playing very similar, of like their strat ploys are relatively the same. Some sort of reroll dice when making a shooting attack, some sort of reroll dice when making a save. There's not a ton of uniqueness to them. They all kind of relatively play the same, and that's why they're great for just if you're like brand new to tabletop games in general. Companion teams aren't a bad way to go because it's simple like that. You're going to get through the base mechanics, but they're not going to be the stuff that really keeps you interested in playing Kill Team, I'd say.
I 100% agree with that. I think that one of the best examples of that is Hand of the Archon. The Compendium Dark Elder Drukhari team it's good. You can bring 3-4 Darklight weapons, which is extremely, extremely brutal. They're fast, they're mobile, they got, pretty good hit. But Hand of the Archon, while questionably better than the Compendium team, is by far more flavorful and really carries over the feel from the lore and the setting into the game of Kill Team, which really makes a lot of people hate the team because they experience what it's like to be slave run by their opponent.
Nobody should play Hand of the Archon. They're horrible, and they're evil bad elves, and their Torment Grenade sucks. That's my opinion on that one. But no, they're actually a great team. So you've got your tools, you picked out a team, and you get it home and you open the box, and there's a bunch of gray plastic and a bunch of miniatures that are in a bunch of pieces. Guys, what are some tools that are for the hobby side of this that are just absolutely essential for you to have when you're building stuff? Tyler, you mentioned your God hands earlier. There's a little easier, little smaller barriers to entry on some of those tools, but tell me, what are your go-to if you had to pick the tools that you need to get these guys actually put together?
So the first thing you're going to need is you're going to need some spray paint primer to get a base coat on the guys. If you don't have an airbrush, which if you're just getting into the hobby, you probably don't unless you're coming over from, say, another adjacent hobby. From there, then you just need to pick out the colors that you want. Games Workshop and all of the other miniature companies make plenty of paints that are really good. I'm personally preferential to artist hobby paints, so stuff like golden and things like that, because I like to mix my paints. If you just want to go straight from the pot and see it on the model in the color that you want, miniature paints are going to definitely be the way you want to go with that.
Yeah, definitely priming the miniatures is a huge thing. If you try and put paint over gray plastic, it's just not going to work. It doesn't want to stay on there. That primer is really important to making it stick. I'm actually a big fan of what's called the slap chop method. I think it's a great way between using a couple colors and some contrast / speed paints is a great way to get miniatures on the table. Do either of you guys use the slap chop method? And can you tell us a little bit about what it is? There's also a million videos on the internet if you look up slap chop. It's not the guy who is dicing up the onions either.
Yeah, personally, I've never actually used the slap chop method, but I've used stuff similar to it. Slap chop is just kind of a fun name. I don't actually know if it stands for anything in terms of it. I'm sure it does, but I'm too dumb to remember. But for what I remember, it's very much what you'll hear often is a term called zenithal highlighting, which is when you'll prime your model, like say in a dark gray or a black, and then from atop of it, a much lighter spray of a lighter color, like either a light gray, a white, a bone white, something like that, to represent the natural shadows that fall when you got light coming on above you. It's useful to kind of get some pre-shading done because any color that's going over a white is going to be lighter than if it's going over a dark gray or a black, especially bright colors like red, orange, yellow, any sort of the warm colors like that. Beyond that, it's a lot of the contrast paints. Thankfully, they work pretty well. Especially the second line they've done of them has improved the quality tenfold. For those of you not aware of contrast, it is essentially a lot of paints will come out and it'll be that same color the entire time, while contrast is a little bit of a mix. It's kind of like a shade or like a much more liquidy paint where it will seep into the recesses and keep the darker parts in that, so shadows look more natural. And then once you kind of just do your basic colors of that in the contrast, go back and touch up what you want with the highlights and just more individual colors than itself. And I think that's relatively slapshot. You'll have to confirm whether I passed the test or not, Chuck, but I think that's where it roughly goes.
Yeah, you got it right. Basically, it's to use Appreciate, like you said, either a zenithal or a dry brush on the model, and then transparent paints like Contrast, Speed Paint, the Army Painter Quick Shade, I believe it is. I don't know. There's a million different brands. Inks work also. There's all kinds of different stuff. But basically, because you're using a transparent paint, the pre-shading you did shows through, and you get better results for the amount of work often.
Yeah, I definitely recommend it. Anybody who is just getting into army painting, it's a great way to start off. Just go to YouTube and look for Slap Chop. There's a million videos of it. Every content creator out there has done their own version of it and how they've upgraded it. But I still really think it's a very effective way to get a great looking model. On our Discord, killteamcascadia.com, you can find the link there. There's a hobby chat channel too, where people will talk to you all day long about painting and give you a bunch of tips and tricks and stuff too. So we've got our team, we got it built, we got it painted, and maybe even not painted, but gentlemen, how do you get it to the game store so you can play? A lot of these models actually have little spindly bits on them that can be kind of fragile. What's your favorite way to transport your models? I know that you're starting at the beginning gray plastic. You can kind of just put them in anything you want, but you've taken that time. You've watched the slap chop videos. You've got your paint job on and you don't want it to be chipping off. Tyler, what's your favorite way to transport your models?
I'm kind of bougie. I like the Table War mini case for mine. But really all that is a fancy case with some magnetic trays inside of it and some latches that make it easy for me to transport stuff. A lot of people I know use cookie tins for their models as long as they're not too tall. From there, they just put a couple magnets in the bottom, throw them in the cookie tin, throw the lid on, and then throw the rest of their stuff in a backpack or bag, bring it to the store with them, play some games.
Yeah, and the magnets you need to make those stick to whatever you're transporting them in. I've also seen people with like toolboxes. A lot of times you can go on eBay and find like 2x3mm magnets that you can actually glue to the base to make sure that your miniatures stay in place where they are.
Yeah, the magnet cookie tin method, it's probably one of the most classic Warhammer methods ever for transporting it. And thankfully, it works really well for Kill Team because we're only transporting a squad of models. It's much easier to transport 5 guys than it is 50 and a couple of tanks. The other method you'll often see is people will do foam. I was originally subscribed to the foam method, and it still works for the most part. Fortunately, if you were playing models with lots of dangly bits like Scutari and swords and stuff like that, might be a little bit of trouble. I've now had a couple of my swords get bent and had to chip them off. But for anything kind of like a Space Marine or Imperial Guard where they don't have spindly bits off the side of them, you'll be fine 99.9% of the time in foam. And you can find those everywhere. Any hobby store, for the most part, will have something like that. And you can get them off Amazon or online sites all the time.
Yeah, I used to be a big fan of foam myself. It was really the only option out there for many, many years. It felt like, especially if you're transporting a very large army for Warhammer or something like that. But I had too many little spindly bits break off. And then paint rub off also is a big problem with foam. So magnetic trays are the only way I go these days.
I actually have a homemade transportation system that uses essentially, I believe it's a sheet of tin from roofing that sits in the bottom of a plastic, like Rubbermaid style container, and that I've double-sided taped down to it and just drop the miniatures with the magnets into it. And it works great for me. I've made a couple of them now, and I've got them small enough that I can fit them in my backpack, and then I've got some bigger ones for if I do go play Big Hammer. But I really like that. So there's a lot of different ways to get your stuff to and from the store, whether it be homemade, the fancy tableware boxes, or something with foam.
Yeah, just another homemade method I'd shout out: tackle boxes, tool boxes. You can put magnets on the bottom of them. Just make sure it's big enough to fit the model, of course. But I've seen plenty of people do that. Tool boxes are nice, and tackle boxes as well, because they come with a handle. And when you're moving models around, sometimes just carrying it rather than putting it in a backpack can be pretty useful, especially if you got your rule books and a bunch of other stuff hanging out in the backpack as well.
I think Paige has a ammo tin actually that they use for transporting their team.
Really?
So that's a pretty cool one too. Yeah.
That's so sick. That's awesome.
So we've gotten to the store. Our models are on tack because we used a very smart method to transport them, and we're getting set up at the game. So the very first thing we do, one of the first things we do is deploy our team. Now, what is Tyler, what's an alpha strike? I've heard this before. I've been on the receiving end of it before, but what's something that people want to look out for when they are deploying specifically alpha strikes?
Basically, an alpha strike is when you get shot really hard, that first activation, and sometimes key models will get taken off the board so that you can't activate them and do the things you need to be able to win. So really, when you're playing your game, you want to make sure that you're deployed safely behind cover, properly on conceal, properly hidden or obscuring. If it's your first game, talk with your opponent about it. They will be able to help you out a lot. If they're an experienced player, they shouldn't just railroad you real hard, hopefully, if you talk to them. If you don't talk to them, who knows what's going to happen.
So speaking of talking to your opponent, what's some things that you hash out with your opponent pregame to make sure that there's a basic understanding around?
So this is one thing I like to really stress at all events is that, or any game, is that you need to talk about the terrain with your opponents. Before you determine who's going, who's deploying, where your barricades are going, you need to determine where your kill zones are. So who controls what half of the boards, where your deployment zones are, and then the terrain. Is it heavy? Where's the vantage? What is obscuring? Stuff like how you're going to deal with the oil rig on Octarius or any other weird terrain you may experience. If you don't talk about terrain and how it's played, especially at an event, the judge may come by and tell you, oh no, you're playing it this way. I'm making this call right now because you guys didn't discuss it beforehand.
So now when you say talk about the terrain, like some of the things we have people talk about is doors. Like, are the doors, can you walk through a door? Or are the doors blocked? Or like the pipe on the Octarius terrain, is it there and actually obscuring? Or is it like, are we going to ignore it? Connor, what about you?
Yeah, doors. I say play with them always because it's makes my team better, and I just think it makes for a healthier game overall. But yeah, definitely talking about terrain, especially how you want to play it. Sometimes you'll see windows through doors on a couple of the Actarius heavy terrain pieces have them. A couple of the Chalneth and like 8th edition releases have like slight windows. Talk with your opponent whether you want to play with those windows as being shootable through or not, stuff like that. Otherwise, in another important discussion piece, proxying models. Sometimes people will only have one box and they can't build both heavy gunners, but they'll have them on the roster. So make sure, like, hey, this gunner represents, or this gun represents this profile. Stuff like, I know he's got a power sword, but for this game, I want to try him out with a taser goad instead. Things like that. Proxying, for the most part, doesn't come up too much of an issue. Most teams really only have one or two options, and people will go most of the time. But as always, this is a social game. You got to talk with your opponent.
Now, one of the things that even to this day still stumps me is picking secondaries. Now, we're not going to get into like the sweaty meta of what to pick on stuff, but do you guys have just a general rule of thumb, maybe a couple secondaries that most teams have that you like to help get some points, but also not make it too hard on yourself while you're new to the game?
I mean, you can't go wrong with Seek and Destroy. It's called Kill Team, not Objective Team, not anything else. And Seek and Destroy lets you do what the game's about, killing your opponents and scoring points.
So what are some of your favorite Seek and Destroy ones, and what are some to avoid?
I mean, the clear choices are Rob and Ransack. route, and then depending on who you're facing, assassinate target or headhunter can be useful, but it's really match dependent on that.
Yeah, I do agree. I love the Seek and Destroy stuff. I played a year of Casterkin, and I did not take anything other than Seek and Destroy and Vital Objective in a single competitive match.
Yeah, Seek and Destroy, it's my go-to as always. If you're playing Capture, eliminate guards. It's just 3 points. Eliminate guards is kill an opponent that was on an objective, and Capture requires your opponent to be standing at it at the end of the turn. So it's really useful. For a basic rundown of Connor's what the 4 archetypes are, there is Seek and Destroy, which is kill your opponent, and very offensive based. There is Security, which is very much more like positioning based on defensive stuff, like controlling access points on Into the Dark, controlling heavy terrain on open board, making sure your opponent's not there, making sure you're essentially playing a defensive game of like holding the line, not letting your opponent get on your half. Then on the flip side, you have Recon, which is all about positioning, but more offensively, controlling flanks of the board, getting on top advantage, getting into other rooms if it's Into the Dark, just being mobile. It's really good for teams like Elves, where you have naturally fast teams. And then Infiltrate is the one I'm the least familiar with, but it's kind of like a weird tricksty one. You want to be near your opponents, but not actually killing them. You want to be punching them in melee, but not doing damage, but rather taking an implant action. And I can't even really remember what else there is besides those, because you don't see them too often. But Infiltrate is a very fun, like weird archetype. If you guys can describe it better, you might be able to.
Tyler can maybe describe it. Like I said, I know nothing but Seek and Destroy.
Yeah, I've never ran Infiltrate ever in my life. I think it's generally regarded as the worst set of tac ops out there.
Yeah, it's unfortunately pretty not great, which is a shame because they're probably the most flavorful, especially for narrative. Like, I think this one's no longer in the game. It was part of. Oh yeah, I guess we should mention that there is now 2.5 flavors of tac ops and / secondaries. There's the ones that came out in the original release of Kill Team with the Octarius box called tac ops, and then there was what was about a year into it, critical ops. Those are what most tournaments and most people will play in match play because it's just a more balanced system. It's what a lot of the rules run off. Critical Ops has now got a update to it called Approved Ops, and they come with the same cards. The exception being the Approved Ops, which is the newer card pack, comes with I think like 10 maps for how to do maps on Into the Dark. Both secondaries in them are the exact same, so you don't have to worry about like getting mixed up in that regard. So if you playing Approved Ops, you're playing the same as Critical Ops. But back to my original point, there was an old one I really liked in Infiltrate where it was like you kill an enemy model in engagement range, you not only remove the enemy model, but you also remove your model that did it to represent like knocking them out and taking them back to base for interrogation, which is such a cool thematic thing. Sadly, it's not very good, and I don't even think it's in the game anymore.
Yeah, I think that's one thing for people to be aware of is that while there have been data slate and rules updates, and so your teams may have been updated, the missions that you play for the game, those have been updated quite a bit too. So if you do come across and you happen to find a Octarius box or the first Into the Dark box and you get those cards, they're not going to be tournament ready. They're fun, but I've gone to a few tournaments and sat next to opponents and been like, buddy, you can't use those because some of the stuff, like Connor said, is not in the game anymore. So something to keep an eye on. The cards are still great to get yourself started and get some reps under your belt for the game itself.
Yeah, thankfully you can find those cards on the classic sites where you can find the rules, as well as I know the KT Dash app has them, which I think is on both like iPhones, Androids, all phones. So if you can't find a set of the cards, definitely take a look at the app. Take a look on Wahapedia for like online stuff, other online sites. I don't know if I should mention Waha, but you'll be able to find them at least on an online source and get them. You can always print your own as well, which I know plenty of people do. That's totally fine because you can't get upset at people for printing cards when they can't find them in stores.
I think that the approved ops are pretty available these days also. So people shouldn't have an issue at most of their local stores going in there. And if they don't have them in stock, you can usually ask them to order them in and they can get them pretty quickly.
Yeah, the approved ops is way different than the crit ops as far as for finding the cards. I've seen them on just sitting on shelves multiple times where I tried to order the crit ops ones for like 6 months and couldn't get them. So the nice thing is if you're getting into the game right now, you're going to be able to find those much, much easier. Now, Tyler, you said something that I wanted to come back to, and you said it's not points team, it's kill team. But to win this game, you do have to score points. As a new player, how would you focus on making sure that you're still scoring points while spending time killing and doing the fun part of the game, spending time scoring to do the winning part of the game?
I think it comes with time. Overall, generally, you want to learn how to play the game. And then eventually, just by nature of playing more of the game, you're going to learn how to play the missions. Focusing on the mission is extremely important. Obviously, you can't win on just secondaries unless you somehow table your opponent before they can score any, which would be really impressive or really sad for them, depending. But you definitely want to take your time, learn. Don't worry about it too much at first. It'll come with practice.
So how do you make sure that even though if you're going out there and you're losing, but you're having a good time, how do you make sure that you're a good opponent in that situation? Connor, you are the sportsman guy. You wanted to kill Scream too. How do you make sure that even though you're not winning, you're having fun and being a good opponent and making it a good time for your opponent too?
Being a good opponent is super important. You always want to make sure that you're having a good time and your opponent is. Otherwise, people aren't going to want to play with you and you're going to become a pariah. But thankfully, it's not too hard to have a good time playing Kill Team. Easiest way is, make stupid jokes about, when your models die, you're like, oh, make overly graphic stories about how your opponent just like cut your guy's leader's head off or something like that. Or, wow, you just shot me with a plasma gun. I now have a gaping hole in my chest. Stuff like that is being ridiculously over the top is kind of always fun. It creates a little story. Beyond that, being an engaging opponent, asking questions, I always say, about like how you got into Kill Team, why are you here, stuff like that. It's simple, it's basic, but it works. People like to talk about themselves. People like sharing what got them into this ridiculous hobby. Beyond that, making sure that as you get a little bit more familiar with the game, being like, hey, just a heads up that if you do this here, you will be in range for like a charge or a grenade throw or something like reminding your opponent, especially if they're newer, hey, before you move off the point, make sure you loot it or something like that. Just being a kind person, making sure you're not winning the game off I gotchas and kind of misleading your opponent. If they ask a question about, hey, if I move in here, will you be able to do this? Being honest, things like that, always important. Just being friendly and honest is the most important part of Kill Team.
Yeah, I think that the thing that's most important to me about Kill Team or tabletop games in general, like Kill Team or Warhammer, is that it's a negotiation between you and your opponent across the table. So you're really there to make a friend, hopefully, or at least, have a friendly game with them. And so from there, you're going to be negotiating the whole time. You're going to be talking about what's going on, making sure that you're both enjoying the whole thing.
Yeah, I think that kind of goes to etiquette behind the game as well, too. You talked about, Connor, making sure you loot a point before you move off of it. One thing that I think is important to know in Kill Team and even a lot of miniature games in general is talking about intent and discussing stuff through with your opponent on what you want to do versus what you actually can do and coming to an agreement to it. Squad Games did a great podcast on it about intent, but Connor, what would you have to say about that point?
Yeah, intent's extremely, extremely important. One of the most common things you'll run into regarding intent is the barricade trick. For those that don't know, barricades in this game, extremely important cover pieces. They're about, a quarter of an inch thick. But what that means is you can have a model be within an inch of the barricade to get cover, but rather within an inch of the back of the barricade, but not within an inch of the front. So anytime you make a move like that, you'll be safe from getting charged from the other side of the barricade. The opponent would have to wrap their way around. So making sure like the intent here is that I'm within cover of the barricade, but not within charge. You're going to see that one a ton and it's going to come up a lot. Otherwise, intent stuff like placing barricades near doors more so on open than on into the dark, but being like, the intent here is that my models are on 28 millimeter bases, so I can sneak my way through, but your guys are Marines, so they're on 32 millimeters, so they're going to have to charge over the barricade if they want to get through this barricade that's next to this wall here. Discussing intent anytime you make a move, extremely important. Just, being clear like that. Another important etiquette thing I'd say is allow takebacks for the most part, especially in casual games, especially if you're new. I'd say, as long as dice haven't been rolled, be like, oops, I'm an idiot and forgot to like use this tack ploy before I move this guy. Let me do that. And they're like, yeah, of course. Stuff like that. As long as dice haven't been rolled, allow takebacks for the most part.
Yeah, that's something we touched on earlier as far as marking where your guys are, making sure that before you pick up a model and move it, you've either marked clearly where you're starting from or proxying another model. I know a lot of times I'll take an extra trooper and I'll bring them onto the board to kind of see where I can actually put a guy and talk through my opponent and see like, hey, does this charge work? Do I have enough movement to get to this, to get onto this point? But then leaving the original model in the spot that it's at so we know where it was from. I know that when I was playing in the Killscream 2 final with Brandon, Greg brought it up a lot, was saying like, hey, you guys need to make sure you're pre-measuring before you're moving, because we were getting kind of loosey-goosey with it, and I think we were maybe fudging a couple things. Not going to say that's why I lost, but I'm not going to say it's not why I lost. No, just Brandon beat the crap out of me.
Yeah, movement is extremely important in this game, and anytime you're doing it, you want to make sure you're doing it legit, because this game does come down to those quarter of an inches. I've had multiple times where I've either won or lost a game because I positioned just the right way or just the wrong way, and it meant I couldn't reach a point for securing it on the final turn. Which it sucks when that happens, but it feels great when you win off that. But those are the lessons you're going to learn and stick with you and help you improve the most by just making sure you're playing the game well.
I think more than any other game that I've played, talking to your opponent and saying like, hey, here's what I'm going to try and do. You're giving up a little bit of what you may be doing, but also before you get to that point and your opponent says, no, you can't do that. Talking it through and finding out like, hey, is this something that you believe I can do? Because I believe I can do it, and coming to an agreement on it.
There was this great moment at Tacoma last year for me where I was playing Commandos in the second to last game, and there was a spot over at the edge of the board where I knew that I could be obscured and make a shot, non-reciprocal shooting to my opponent. And it was hard to figure out exactly where that spot was. But we both talked about it. We're like, yes, we both agree that this spot exists here. We both agree that I have the movement to make it to this spot. So we put it in approximately where the spot we both kind of felt it was, without kind of fighting about it too much. We talked about all of the other movements that could be made and stuff like that as it pertained. And then we agreed upon it and moved on with our game as that model being safe from opponent fire.
That's a great example, because stuff like that, as we've discussed, discussing with your opponent's important, and it'll cut down on time. As long as you're not arguing with your opponent, that's always good. You want to have a good time with them, but just making sure you can cut out those discussions that are going to require maybe like a third party, or just like kind of require some back and forth. Just cutting that out will save you 5-10 minutes. That adds up, and make sure if you're at a tournament or just even casual games, you're playing them in an appropriate amount of time. And B, if you are at a tournament, it's great because it means you can finish your games earlier and have a longer break to really think about how that game went and how you can improve in the next one.
So let's talk a little bit about time. That is something that I think is important for a new player. If you're playing a casual game at a game shop, a lot of times you don't have time constraints unless the store is going to close or something. But sometimes it can feel like you're playing slow, or you don't know what you need to do. What are some things we can do to speed ourselves up and make sure we're playing at not a fast pace, but at a good pace for the time that we have, and making sure that our opponents doesn't think that we're slow playing them too. I got you guys stumped on that one. So I know one thing that I do is, especially in a casual game, as I'm not afraid to fail. Like this weekend, I played Blades Gain. It's my second game with them, and I don't know, by the end of the game, I only had 2 Aspect Warriors left, I think, but that was because I was kind of trying some stuff out and throwing stuff at Sam and seeing what I could do. And it was helpful for me to see where I was going to fail on that too. So I think that's one thing that's important, is to just to get into the game and see what your team can do and learn about it in games where you're not afraid to fail.
Yeah, I think that that's really important for people to do. a lot of times where I see people really struggling is after they've learned all of the basic stats for their models and stuff like that. They get analysis paralysis. They're stuck trying to figure out the single best move, the one move that's going to make them the game. And if you're not losing, you're not learning. Make that move, make that choice, get it on, and see where it takes you.
Definitely. Sometimes you just got to make that play, and who knows if it's the best one, but it's better to make a play and adjust to it than it is to spend 5 minutes thinking about what the best case is. Beyond that, as you're kind of wrapping up a turning point, say you have like each 2-3 models left to go, start in your head thinking, okay, this is roughly what, like, say all the models on the left flank get finished and there's nothing that's going to interact with that left flank for the rest of the turning point. For the next turn, what is going to happen on that left flank? What will I do if I lose initiative? What will I do if I win it? Start and try and plan your moves ahead so you know, hey, these are the ploys I'm going to turn on. These are the secondaries I'm going to reveal, or these are the guys I'm going to mark for my secondaries, things like that. Just try and have like the first 2 or 3 actions planned out in your head, so that way you're ahead of the game. And if you're ready with it and your opponent isn't, that can be good. Putting them on the offbeat can give you that victory sometimes if they're having to play catch up with you. Otherwise, just the classic knowing your rules, and relatively at the start of the game especially, ask your opponent, hey, are there any like opening moves I should be aware of that your team can do? Alpha strikes, or like sudden swapping guys to J2, things like that. So that you can try and plan for that, and then when those moves do come up, you're not asking your opponent like, whoa, you're doing what now? Just trying to be aware of like any gotchas they have will just speed up the game for both of you.
Yeah, I think that gotchas and stuff like that, hopefully in your first couple games, aren't going to be a huge issue. The person you're playing with isn't going to spring that stuff on you too hard.
Definitely. Hopefully no one's springing gotchas on you in the first couple of games, but I think it's just a good thing to discuss regardless, even if you're new to the game, both of you and your opponent are, just to be like, hey, it's cool. That's the best way of learning what other teams can do, so you can try and measure out what their common plays will be, so that way you can anticipate them, as well as it gives you flavor. Like, maybe I want to try out that team because a lot of their like special, the things that makes that team unique, those are really cool to me. I want to try that team out now. Stuff like that will help you speed up your games, as well as just you'll have more fun because you'll try out new teams and stuff like that.
So one last bit that I'd like to talk about with etiquette is dice. A lot of times we want to make sure we establish rules on how dice are going to be ruled. So a lot of times people will bring a dice tray, and I always like to tell people at the beginning, hey, I'm going to roll in the tray. If I roll out of the tray, it doesn't count, and I'll re-roll it back in the tray. That way there's some consistency across the board with it. Also, we've got our fancy dice. We've got them for every team, and making sure to point out what the symbols on the dice are, if there are any symbols other than just the regular pips or numbers. My Blades of Cain team has the Eldar symbol on the 6, but some dice have the symbol on a 1 for some reason. So I'd always make sure to explain to your opponent if you have any funky dice as well too.
Definitely important to do. Beyond that, ideally have dice that only have one symbol, or at least one unique one. I've sometimes seen dice that have a unique symbol for both the 1 and 6, or in really weird cases, unique symbols for all of them. I just, honestly, as cool as those are, maybe use that for like your command point counter or something like that. Don't use those for rolling, because sometimes your opponent just needs to look and know exactly so they can determine whether they want to spend command points if you're like, especially doing melee combat. Things like that, that's cut down on any confusion, as well as just in general, try and have clear eligible dice. Don't have, say green dice with lightly green pips that might not stand out. Trying to just make sure it's, it's the same thing like handwriting almost. Clear and eligible is important, especially I'd say for fighting. It's probably one of the most contentious points of how much dice do I need to reroll here, and that stuff's useful.
I think one of the other things to focus on with dice is that you want to make sure that your opponent sees your dice results before you scoop them up for any kind of rerolls or misses or move them or anything like that. If you're rolling and picking stuff up, that's often called fast rolling. We don't want that. We want everyone to know what's going on. Information is key to fair play in this game.
Yes, very true. Similar thing like that. Don't fast roll your own dice against your opponent. If they just roll their dice and say they have rerolls turned on, don't instantly roll your saves after they make a shooting throw. Kind of give them a couple seconds. to see if they're going to reroll anything, especially if it's like a command point dependent type thing. Generally, I'd always just ask, like, okay, so you've got 2 hits and a crit here, to make sure that, like, A, you're both making sure that they're not forgetting like rending or lethal 5 or any something like that can interfere with dice. So you're both understanding what you need to roll in reaction to what they have.
And then one last point that I want to cover is command points. So we spoke to those at the very beginning of the podcast, but there's a few things you can do with command points. It's a limited pool, and sometimes you can maybe not get as much value out of them. Gentlemen, how do you like to spend your command points? Command rerolls are a big one, but then also strat plays, tack plays. Any kind of advice for the newer or learning player that we can tell them on how to spend those valuable resources?
Spend them frivolously and learn from your mistakes is really the correct answer here, in my opinion. You really want to learn from making mistakes and seeing where you messed up in it. Don't try to go too overboard early on. Make sure that you have enough for turning point 2 and turning point 3, but you got to use them to learn how they operate and where they're going to be useful.
Yeah, definitely. The only time I don't, my personal rule, and I think it's a relatively decent one, is don't reroll a command point reroll, especially on saves, even on like a 4-up save. It's fun if your guy survives, but try and think, is this guy staying alive? Like, unless it's the final turning point, or him staying alive is going to secure you a victory point in the immediate future, don't worry about it. Models are gonna die in this game. You can always play 2 defensively, and I'm of the opinion, play 2 aggressively. Lose your team by turn 3. You're going to learn more that way. And hey, you're going to have time for a second game probably if you die that quick. So play an aggressive game and be ready to have your models die. It's sad when it happens, but it's going to. And you just got to accept that. All your special babies are going to get killed in front of you, and there's nothing you can do about that.
I'm going to second that right there. Everyone's going to die in the game to a certain point. So we want people out there just playing the game. We've talked a lot about all kinds of stuff you can do in the game to plan for it and everything like that. But ultimately, getting out there, rolling dice, learning how to play the game, and learning from your mistakes is going to be the single most important thing for you when it comes to the game.
I think one last point on command points is me being a big sports ball guy. I've heard the analogy, you can't use your timeouts on the plane ride home. And the same thing goes with command points. You can't spend your command points in the car ride home. So you might as well throw them out there frivolously.
Definitely. It's a great saying, and it holds true in Kill Team. Just worth mentioning, because it actually came up this last week with me for some players that were coming from trying out Kill Team from Big Hammer. Yes, you can spend command points multiple times in the turning point. You cannot spend them on a dice that's already been rerolled. That's just a bare rule throughout Kill Team. If a dice has already been rerolled, it cannot be rerolled again. I don't think there's any team or any rule that breaks that exception. But say you make an attack with 4 dice and you miss everything, but you have 4 command points. You can spend all 4 of them to reroll all 4 of those dice. I would not often recommend doing so, but as long as you have the command points to do so, you can continually reroll in the same thing, right? In the same attack or save or whatever, as long as it hasn't already been rerolled. I said rerolled like 80 times there. I hope I didn't confuse everyone.
No, you do. What you're basically saying though is that you can't reroll dice that's already been rerolled no matter what, and you can spend command points to do the command reroll multiple times as long as it's on different dice, which is different from Big Hammer.
Correct. Thank you for fixing my not being smartness.
I'm always here for you, buddy. Gentlemen, any last words of wisdom for the new or still learning player?
Just go out and play the game. Make some friends. Talk to the people across the table from you. You'll get stuff wrong at first, but we all did. And you'll learn it a lot faster by playing someone, especially someone maybe you don't know so well, or that is more familiar with the game, than you will by trying to read all of the rules and master everything before you get out there and play.
100% agree. Couldn't agree more. Another source of knowledge, as weird as it can be, beyond listening to the great Kill Team Cascadia Vox Cascadia Podcast, checking out other podcasts, but even more so than that, battle reports. Ideally make sure that the new edition of Kill Team battle reports, but you'll learn a lot about the game just watching other people play if you can't, make it out that evening to play. And you'll get to experience teams you won't often see. Maybe it'll be a team that you haven't seen yet in person, stuff like that. Maybe you'll see a new rule come up. Of course, it's not, a perfect solution, but it can be fun, and you'll see new things that you hadn't yet considered. I'd recommend Mountainside Tabletop. I love that channel. Their videos are like 20 minutes long, and they're great. And beyond them, Disregarding Dice. Good old Zach just put out a second battle report, I believe, and it was pretty enjoyable. So watch his content if you like novitiates.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Connor, is that there's a lot of resources out there for this game. I think that if you can't get out and play a game, finding a podcast like Squad Games or Command Point or Can You Roll a Crit, who's broken down the team that you want to play, is super helpful too. I know that in my learning with Casserkin, I cannot remember the gentleman's name, but he had a like a 20-minute video on how to play Casserkin, and that stuck in my head and made all the world of difference. So once you decided on that team, even if you got some reps in, take a look at what other people are doing with them.
By any chance, was it VentureMinis? If you happen to remember that, he had like in Casserkin and an Imperial Guard video.
That was him. Yeah. I took a screenshot of what what tac ops to use, and used that at Adepticon last year. And I think he got second or third place at that tournament with his vet guard. But yeah, that was who I just opened the world of Casserkin to me.
Nice, that's awesome. Yeah, I love that guy's content. He's got some great videos on VetGuard if you're looking into them, and he's also got a solid video of this. Like, here's the top 3 tricks to look out for like every team in the game. It's like 20 minutes, and each team gets like a minute. It's essentially like a little slideshow, but it's not bad if you're going up a team in a tournament or just a team you've never played against in general. Look it up so you're a little bit more aware beforehand. It's nice, simple 3 sentences to read.
Yeah, that's the what to watch out for is a great video from him too. And then going forward, if anybody has any questions on anything we talked about, definitely reach out to us. We'd love to talk about Kill Team if you can't tell. So with that, we have some questions from our community. So the first question comes from Adelaide, and the question is, if Kill Team Cascadia had to change its name to avoid copyright infringement, what would it be?
I'm going to go with Connor is the greatest and condone no wrong. No, that's obviously not fake. I have no idea what we'd change it to. At least I'd hope we keep Cascadian, because that's just a kind of fun word. It describes the area well, and it just creates like a cool little term for everyone. We can all be like, we're the Cascadians of that, and it kind of gives us a nice collective group name. But I guess I'd probably have to go to Tyler for like a more appropriate branch name. He's the one that like founded it, so I guess I'll defer to him for that.
I think it'd be Cats. I think we just go with Cats. We'd become less of a team and more of an organization.
And what's CATS stand for?
I can't answer that, sorry.
That's true. CATS is what you make of it. We may have to change our name, at least the acronym, because KTC is Kill Team Casuals, right? It's Tyler's buddy Ben, and we've stolen the acronym and just run with it.
So here's the thing. Kill Team Cascadia predates Kill Team Casuals. No beef. Right as actually the week we went live in public with Kill Team Cascadia, they debuted their podcast, which was kind of wild.
Great minds think alike when it comes to awesome abbreviations, so that's always good. Maybe we could just try and like form a real word out of KTC, because I like the way that abbreviation comes together, and it just rolls off the tongue well, so I'd hate to lose it.
A side story, my girlfriend's family adopted a foster rescue dog, and my girlfriend's mom posted on Facebook that the name was TBD. So I said, oh, well, her name's TBD. And they eventually went with it, and the dog's name is Tibby now.
That's awesome. I love that so much. That reminds me too, another side tangent. If you guys have ever seen Arrested Development, I love that show, one of my favorites, but they had the foundation for TBD as well, and everyone thought it was like a disease they were donating to, because the family couldn't decide on what they should donate to.
So what are your thoughts on seasons 4 and 5 of Arrested Development?
I watched them once and quickly forgot them both, and when I do reruns now, I just go 1 to 3 and pretend it ended there.
Yeah, that's like I don't watch seasons 8 and 9 of The Office, really.
Yeah, sometimes just great shows kind of lose that footing, which is always a shame.
4 seasons max on television. If you can't sell me a show in about 22 episodes at about an hour a piece over 4 seasons, you don't deserve to tell me the story. There's a few exceptions, but that's a hard rule for me.
Now you're going to anger the One Piece fans out there because apparently there's over 1,000 episodes. I watched the Netflix live action show and thought, hey, this is really good. I really enjoy this. Let's check out the anime. And there's like 60 episodes in the first season.
Yeah. My friends, I'm like ironically the only one of my like in-person friend group that I grew up with that's not big into anime. All of them have been talking about that show since I first met them in like 8th and ninth grade, which was 12 plus years ago, and it's still coming out. I think we might be dead before that show ends.
Yeah, I guarantee we probably will. Although I will tell you the live action was actually really good. I don't watch a lot of shows by myself, and I really enjoyed that one. So if you have a chance, I'd check it out. But Adelaide, I don't think we have a good answer for you. So if you could come up with anything, we would love to hear it as well. Now, the next question comes from Greg. And Greg said, if you had to design a new mechanic for an operative that hasn't been done, what would it be? And Greg's answer to that is an ability that deals damage in melee when your opponent parries your strike, like the opposite of the Novitiate's Duelist.
So personally, I wish that the Colts, rather than just like mutating their guys, they had to sacrifice their guys. So, it was a rolling buff on their big monster, but they had to trade units for those buffs as the game went on. And that's really what I would have liked to see out of the team, I think.
So do you think that they would get more cultists to start off with, or still keep the same amount of cultists and just have to decide if they want to pay that price or if the price is worth it?
Yeah, basically, they would keep the same number of cultists. I think they already have an extreme amount of units, 15, which is the most in the game other than Gellerpox. So they would just make the choices from there about how the buffs and the possessions and the mutations are going to get rolling and what they're going to do. I'd like to see it kind of like essentially they're buffing the one guy in the team to run forward, and hopefully it turns into a big enough monster to massacre everyone before they can stop it.
So Connor, this is a perfect time for your AdMech corner of the week. What would you like to see a new rule for a new mechanic for AdMech?
I fully agree with what Tyler said. I hate Colts. They're my least favorite team in the game. I despise them. It's a little bit of an over-exaggeration, but it is probably Hunter Clade's worst matchup. We have 0 blast, and not having a grenade or anything like that is very sad when finding that big of a guy. Honestly, I didn't think of anything that I would like to have to add mech. Maybe we get our 5-up invuln save that we've had in 40k for forever, and before that it was a 5-up feel no pain. I'm willing to take either of those, but that's not really a new mechanic. I think 2 things I came up with though. One would kind of be there's a keyword in 40k called Lance that when you charge, you then when making an attack like have +1 to your wound roll. It's like a whole different thing, but I think that would be kind of neat. Like charging right now already for the most part gives you you attack first, but I think it would be cool for certain for like a new keyword entirely that if you charge, you hit one better for like a couple of weapons only. I think that could be kind of neat. Otherwise, I'd like to see explosive breach charges, especially for like Into the Dark when they have those blowing up walls. But I think that'd be a neat thing. Like, if you've ever played Rainbow Six Siege or Call of Duty, there's like drill charges that you can throw through windows and drop a grenade like on the other side of the wall without breaking it. I think that'd be kind of cool as like either an operative or like maybe a piece of equipment for a couple teams. Where if people are hiding in heavy cover, sucks to be them. Here's a grenade on your feet. I don't know how you'd really make that fair. But I think that'd be a cool operative for like a new team or something. Scouts could have had something like that, which would be fun.
Yeah, we didn't say fair. We just said new, and that sounds new and fun.
What about you, Chuck?
I've been racking my brain. This is why I just moderate this and don't actually have much of an opinion on anything. I like Greg's idea. I like more of a repost or something where you're in melee, and I like the ability to damage your opponent when you parry. So I think that would be good. Something to kind of keep people from charging you, or if they do charge you, they know that it's going to hurt even more too. I know there's a lot of guys that have like a fight first or something, but something where you can basically, if your opponent strikes, you can strike them with a free dice or something. So I do like the mechanic on the Striking Scorpions, and actually I'm really liking the Howling Banshees too. I like their new mechanics with the mandible blasters where you jump in and automatically hit them. And then I like the Scream That Steals. I actually use that. That's the one where you can shoot with your Banshee mask. I think it's Scream That Steals. You can shoot with your Banshee mask, and it's like 6 attacks hitting on 3s, 1-2 damage. But I actually did a little chip damage before I jumped into somebody. So I think more mechanics like that, where you have a little spice when you get into combat with someone, especially with like fun melee teams.
Yeah, that'd definitely be cool. More keywords are always fun. It doesn't have to be fair. We're just creating new stuff. Otherwise, I'd say more so like a new mechanic for the game rather than any team in particular. I think it'd be cool if they kind of had them in some of the Into the Dark narrative stuff, but like those little like machine gun turret on the wheels and like the buzzsaw stuff like that. The classic red barrel that explodes. I think that'd be kind of cool if you could like each person maybe brought something like that to the game on top of like their barricades. And so on an objective, you can put a red barrel that provides cover, but if an opponent decides to shoot at it and they roll well enough or something, it explodes in your face and now you're on fire. That'd be fun. I like red barrels that explode, so give it to me. Or more orbital strikes. I've been playing a lot of Hell Divers too right now. That game's great. Let me call in artillery all the time. Vet guard, but like way better.
I think that we have most of those mechanics as far as like exploding stuff and things like that in the game. It's just mostly used for narrative play.
Yeah, that's true. It's in narrative. I want it in match play, or at least more commonly used, because I think that's cool. I like blowing things up. It's always good.
Blowing things up is always good. And with that, I think we can wrap it up for tonight. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. Again, my name is Chuck. I'm at Painting Cave Minis. You can also find us on KillTeamCascadia.com for our Discord, and tell the fine folks again where they can find y'all.
You can find me at Lowbrow Minis on Instagram, or at dicethrower.bigcartel.com when I do drops of merch.
Do we have any merch in the pipeline right now, Tyler?
You know, we may have some 420 specific merch coming up.
Nice.
For our Blunt Force beatdown, so that should be good.
Nice. That's always good to hear. Always good to get the sick merch. And as for where you can find myself, I'm at Spanaway. That's Spanaway with 2 N's at everything there is. So yeah, come ask me questions about Hunterclade, about why they're the best, about why I'm so happy I've converted Chuck into trying the team, and all that good stuff.
And then one thing Tyler mentioned is the Blunt Force Beatdown. We just launched that this week, and last time I checked, we only had a couple tickets left. I think we started it at 32, and we only have like 4 tickets left at this point. So get your tickets while you can, but we will be expanding that tournament. So don't wait too long, though, because we will cap it at some point.
Way to go, KTC community, and everyone buying those tickets. I know at least a couple people from the local area that are new to Kill Team said they're coming down, so that'll be exciting. Beyond that, not us, but Tacoma Open. Buy those tickets; those are selling quick. I don't know if they've even really announced a limit, but you might as well try and get them now, and then that way you can definitely see all of us there.
Well, thank you again so much, everybody, for listening. KillTeamCascadia.com for our Discord. Come on, ask us questions. Maybe you can be in the community questions for next week. So thank you again so much. And by the way, Connor, those pictures I was sending you all weekend, those weren't my ad mech. Those were somebody else's.
Why are you like this, Chuck? Come on, man. That's so